So let me begin by welcoming everyone to Mike and Darren Unplugged with I'm Darren Staloff. Mike is Mike Segru, and our host and technological impresario is Genevieve Segru. We thank her for hosting us. I'd like to jump in with a question because Mike and I, although we give a lot of philosophy lectures, are actually guilty of being historians. And the problem of being an historian is you are limited by the sources that are left. And we know that no source is complete. So Mike, if you think back about thinking broadly from as many millennia as you choose, or many centuries, could you think of 10 events that you would really have liked to have been sort of the fly on the wall and, hearing what actually happened?
Well, thanks for the question. It's a good one. I've been working intermittently on a history of the world. Have a chunk written, but even more to go. It just won't stop happening. That being said, there have been times when I thought, I would give my right hand to be able to be a fly on the wall, or better still, a fly on the dinner table. So that way I get to see everyone with those great compound eyes. And I have hopefully stereo ears so that I can really get a good sense of what and where things are happening. And the first one is the earliest one. And, I'll leave this to you. I think it would have been amazing to be on the spot when Göbekli Tepe was first starting to be built. Okay. Now, for those of you who don't know what Göbekli Tepe is, this is an ancient, for want of a better word, temple. It's a sanctuary space. It's built of large stone emplacements. There are, inside that, T-shaped headless anthropoid idols. Some of them are as tall as 18 feet. They're surrounded by stone benches, and they seem to be structured towards some sort of sky cult. That's assuming that they weren't covered over, which they may have been. What's interesting about these things is that, first of all, they were created by people that did not have domesticated animals, nor had they agriculture. They did not have the wheel, nor did they have metal. So these are Stone Age people who cut these things out of the living rock, out of sandstone, using somewhat harder rock, in this case, flint. So they had flint tools. And if you can stop and think about how much work goes into constructing those stones and those idols, they also constructed sculptures of animals. And in every case, it wasn't domesticated animals. They didn't have any domesticated animals. They were things like wild boar or vultures or snakes or scorpions, things that are frightening and have connotations of death with them. Okay, the key thing here is that this was started, roughly speaking, 9600 BC. Now, this wrecks everything we thought we knew about the River Valley civilizations. It turns out that cultural complexity requiring hundreds of workers and the organization of hundreds of workers was accessible to hunter-gatherers on a seasonal basis. Right? So all that economic determinism from Child and the rest of the agricultural revolution, no, I'm sorry. Economics is not the beginning of human culture. Religion is. Now, somebody, I guess some sort of shaman, must have persuaded lots of different hunter-gatherer bands to put together hundreds of people and not slaughter each other. Instead, they're going to do some mystic rite. Okay, I want to hear how he talked people into doing that.
Yeah. And what the cult was. That would have been fascinating. Yeah.
It seems to have something to do with masculinity. It may be a men's house because 100% of the animal sculptures are all male.
I did not realize that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's number one. Okay. I really want to be there. I want to. I want to be on the head of that shaman, walking from culture to culture, saying, "Oh, and by the way, now that we have a language that we agree on, I'm the head of our religion, and the gods and the ancestors say you better get your butt here in October."
Okay.
And they show up.
Well, presumably, if you get the answer to that, it'll apply to Stonehenge as well.
Well, of course, the thing
This
is,
is much later, but yeah.
Well, yeah, there's more time between this and Stonehenge than between Stonehenge and us.
Right.
I hate it when that happens. It completely opens up the dimensions of human history.
Yeah.
And say we have a whole bunch of other stuff we can now look at. Okay, that's number one. All right. I don't have time to explicate that, although maybe I should do a whole series on that.
You may.
But second, okay, I would have liked to have been there for the dinner table bargain between Jefferson and Hamilton.
Yeah.
They had dinner behind closed doors and they solved their political problems. What a pair of adults.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't much care about what the results were because, well, that sounds like reasonable people interacting in reasonable ways, rather than people refusing to find a modus vivendi, a way of living together. So yeah, I got to admit, who's got the eloquence to propose this to? Who has the balls to propose this to the other?
Mm.
Is this corruption or is this just the way politics has to work? We get to decide because this is the inaugural example of this.
Okay.
What an amazing event that must have been. And I would have gotten drinks all around after we finished that.
And with Jefferson, they would have been quality.
I bet they would.
Oh man, he had exquisite taste. Exquisite.
Okay, gotta allow that for that. All right, next one. This is while the barbarian invasions were happening against Rome, Pope Leo, who eventually became Saint Leo, finds that Attila the Hun and his armies are at the gates of Rome. He goes out on his own to meet the armies, which impresses Attila. I mean, that's a stylish thing to do, particularly if you're dressed in all the Pope regalia. I mean, that's got to impress this guy who has fleas. Right. Okay. They talk, and he talks Attila into turning around and going home in exchange for 300 pounds of gold. Say, how about this? How about you just take the money? We'll write you a check in the form of gold, and you don't destroy the city and impale everybody. Well, okay. Attila, his army has the plague anyway, so it's considerably weakened. Says, look, I'm going to take the money and run. I don't want to stay here. It's an unhealthy place to be anyway. I want to go back home. And 300 pounds of gold is a lot both then and now. Okay, that's a good one. All right. Next thing I would have liked to have seen, and this would be the middle of the First World War, the Christmas truce.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but
yeah,
this shows you the stochastic random nature of human nature. I mean, here you got these guys in different trenches who have been murdering each other all fall and are going to murder each other all winter, who are just, look, it's Christmas and they're tired of this and they're thinking about their families, and there's not one of them that wants to be here, right? This was not their idea. They're in the mud and the blood and the shit and the rats. And then one of them, who must have been lucidly delirious, it's the way I've spent so much of my life, he just decided, said, doesn't matter. He takes off his helmet, he climbs up outside above the trench, and while everybody else is sitting around there looking at him like he's crazy, he just walks out there and he's probably singing some Christmas carol.
Yeah.
And it turns out that instead of taking a bullet in the chest, a couple of guys over there do the same thing. All right, within an hour, you have a whole section of the, I'm not making this up, a whole section of the German-French line, right, who are having Christmas together in no man's land. Now, because our first guy probably didn't say this to anyone, because otherwise he's getting shipped off as shell-shocked, was probably undergoing a mental discussion, a little bit like Abraham thinking about, well, shall I sacrifice him or not? In this case, he's thinking about sacrificing himself. But he says, I don't care. Let's do it. And then you get this, which is, I'm sorry, the one, and it's like trying to win the lottery twice in a row. First of all, this guy gets up, and then the rest of the guys say, let's not kill him. And then they all meet out there and they start playing soccer. They start exchanging goods, like, stuff that one side has that there's a shortage of on the other. They start to actually barter stuff. They exchange whiskey for schnapps. They sing Christmas carols in both English and German. And this makes the general staffs on both sides go crazy. And they send in real tough guy colonels and say that, look, everybody that doesn't get back in here and become homicidal is going to be shot. And that's how they actually put this down after 2 days, I think. But that's just an amazing thing. Like, I would really have liked to have seen that. All right. A different one. This is I guess kind of a strange choice. I would love to have been there when Moses and Aaron went to talk to Pharaoh. Oh, this has got to be great.
Okay.
So Moses had a theophany. God spoke to him directly in the form of a burning bush that didn't get consumed. And Moses knew that it was Yahweh in some way that Kierkegaard knows too, but nobody else knows. Okay. It told him to go tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. But God gave him a speech impediment. I guess so he stutters or whatever. So he's got to get his brother Aaron, his elder brother, to speak for him. Okay, so I guess he tells Aaron for about 3 hours what it is that the bush told him. And then Aaron says in 15 minutes to Pharaoh what the bush told him. And I really like to be sitting as a fly on the top of Pharaoh's throne, looking down on this. Because the Pharaoh isn't going to get mad at this stutterer's brother who has announced that he has to let the Israelites go. He's going to look at his chamberlain and his grand vizier and get seriously pissed off. You can see the blood pressure rising. You see, how did these two get in here? What do I pay you for? Right? I have to handle foreign policy. I have to make sure there's enough grain. And here you have a guy who speaks for his brother, who has a message from a bush. What do I pay you for? All right, you're supposed to vet the people that actually get time with me. The Hittite ambassadors are in the foyer cooling their heels while I talk to him. And then Moses stutteringly says, but the talking bush said so. And Pharaoh looks, shut the fuck up. You're not the problem. The problem is that I have incompetent staff. Get out of here before I have your heads. Right, and bring in the ambassador.
Okay.
Right? No, it has to be funny because, I mean, it's such a stupid message in a stupid way. It's not like Yahweh could be a little more direct and say, just show up there himself as a burning bush. Why not? Well, it's not as good a story. And you end up with the wrong people. And, that's not going to work. All right. So that was something I would like to see. I mean, Pharaoh's blood pressure rises. All right. Another one. I want, there are a lot of them. I mean, the Mongols would be an example, but there are actually lots of different, very large, very fierce, very warlike tribes in the steppes of Eurasia. They were pastoralists for the most part. And so they were nomads, but they were expert horsemen. I want to be, I guess, a fly on the muzzle of the horse of the scout that gets sent out by, I don't know, Genghis Khan or any one of those nomadic leaders. Say, I know there's a big wall out there. What I want you guys to do, say, send 2 or 3 of them out. Actually, 2 would be enough. Go out there together. When you hit the wall, separate, go north and south. Tell me which is shorter. Now, a month into riding next to this wall, each of these guys has got to be thinking, are you kidding me? Remember, this is thousands of miles long. No, you can't, you got to be joking. I mean, he's seen walled cities. he's a month into this ride, and there's no signs of this stopping. And he's gotten to a high point on the wall, and he looks into the future, into the distance, and he sees it's just more and more of it. Now, the question is, at what point do you decide to lather, rinse, repeat, and do that forever? And at what point do you decide to become a human being, go back and say, look, I rode hard for a month, all right? And there's no signs of this thing ending. It goes on, as far as I can tell, forever. Now, no, just the experience of, my God, at some point it's got to be disclosed to you that you've been riding and riding and riding. You could ride all year, and there's still more of this, right? It's just, surely the gods had a hand in constructing this, because it goes on forever. So that must have been a great experience, I have to admit. The discovery of ignorance is one of the most interesting and important things in human history. All right, next one is Ashoka's conversion.
Ah, yeah. Interesting.
Ashoka was a Gupta emperor. He was a sociopath. He was a psychopath. He was a piece of work on the order of, say, Caligula or Nero, right?
Actually, I think he was Mauryan.
Mauryan, right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
the name is Gupta. The Mauryan Empire. Ashoka was an expansionist, warlike leader, and he unified a big chunk of India.
Yeah.
And intended to unify it all. And typically, he adopted terror as his method. He would destroy entire cities. This is what we saw in the history of China as well, with Qin Shi Huang Ti ending the period of warring states. But he just issue an ultimatum in the way that Genghis Khan later would too, that either you're going to open your doors or we're going to slaughter everyone when we break in. And so because he had a justifiably fearsome reputation, and he did in fact kill 100,000 people in a bad weekend, and this is putting them all to the sword. He just says, kill everything. Now, he's not the only one that did that. Think of Tamerlane, there are a lot of examples, but that's what he did. And at some point, he also did a number of other things. He had a tiff with one of his concubines, and because he was feeling peevish, he ordered that his entire harem be burned alive. Now that's again stylish. That's in the same league as Caligula. All right, you gotta like that. Or he also operates something called Ashoka's Hell, which did kind of graduate school research in torture. And he did that to people just because he felt like doing it. And you could hear the screams, and that must have been psychologically disorienting for anyone that's sane. So he was really bad. At the end of his life, he had converted. He had a much bigger conversion than St. Augustine could imagine, right? And he becomes a Buddhist, and he spends the rest of his life trying to pay back the damage that he's done. Now, he can't pay the people that are dead back, but he can pay the people of the future back. So he sends missionaries, Buddhist missionaries in every direction, north, east, and west. And he also sends it to the remainder of India that he hasn't conquered, with ambassadors stating, I'm no longer going to militarize the border. I'm no longer going to be a threat to you or anybody else. Good wishes to you. So he becomes a pacifist, he becomes a Buddhist. He sends missionaries out, large numbers, and they are bringing with them all the known medicinal herbs and plants of India. The symbolism is that he wants to heal the world that he's injured, right? And he knows a surprising amount about old world history. He sends 5 sets of missionaries to the 5 kings on the Eastern Mediterranean with their, medicinal plants. And then they have the knowledge of how to use them as well as Buddhism. And he names them, and he gets the names right. All right, this is for places like Syria and Turkey and Egypt. All right, so that's 4,000 kilometers away. That's a long way, all right? So he does that in a kind of fan motion, And this is one of the main ways in which Buddhism stretched its boundaries, all right, including a very heavy connection to China. Okay, so he's trying to make amends. He also orders that he should have a judge that he chooses sent to every county, to every province every 5 years to make sure that justice is sufficiently lenient and fair. Anybody's got a case where you think you were wronged, you can bring it here. He also has wells dug on main roads for the use of travelers, and he has them plant mango trees there. You get shade, you get something to eat. So he's just doing a general public works project. Now, who was it that explained this to him? And it has to have been some Buddhist monks of some kind who have the nerve, who are willing to be set on fire or whatever it is that pops into this guy's mind to tell him, this is no good. This is not what you want. And to actually get him to listen and change his ways and go from psycho to saint. I mean, I sometimes imagine him up in heaven with Saint Augustine, or maybe in the first circle of hell, I'm not sure. But I imagine, first circle of hell would be better. Ashoka would say, what are you in for, kid? And he said, I had sex with a teenage girl. I stole some fruit. And I got born. Yeah. And Augustine would look and say, hardcore. Right? I mean, there's a swing. And you feel real guilty about that? So I could tell you things that I'm guilty of that would curl your hair. Right. I'll show you some repentance. That's a sense of scale. Yeah. All right. That's repentance. All right. So I would have liked to have heard that because I think it's amazing. But let me extend this because this is a twofer. Here's another event I would love to have seen.
Okay.
Josephus, the Jewish historian in Alexandria, so he's a Hellenized Jew. He writes, and this is the only source for it, if memory serves, which it may not, about the Therapeutae. Does anybody know who the Therapeutae are? Nobody does, but they're really amazing. These appear to be guys who were called philosophers, and they were also called healers because they had a lot of medical knowledge and medical techniques. I would like to suggest they also had a whole bunch of medical plants. Okay. They came to Egypt because that was one of the places that the Buddhist missionaries with the medicinal plants were sent. And of course, they didn't go to Karnak or Luxor, they went to Alexandria. Okay. Once in Alexandria, they do whatever it is they do politically, and they give the medical community the plants, but then they turn back into Buddhist monks. This is what's really weird. They go into the Libyan desert and live alone as hermits. And Josephus says they kept their old traditional philosophy, what we might call doctrines. And they kept the hymns and prayers that go with it. Okay. But Josephus says they also had parts of the Old Testament because they learned to read Hebrew. So now they're going to be Jewish Buddhists. All right. But instead of living in communities, because community is so central to Jewish life, these guys do the Buddhist thing and they go out and they're unmarried. So they live lives of chastity, poverty, and isolation. And what they do is they groove with Buddha, whatever it might be involved in that meditation or, okay. But here's the deal. They read and understand at least some of the Hebrew scriptures. And as a result, every seventh day, they all leave their caves or wherever it is they're living in the desert, and they all come together and they celebrate the Sabbath. Okay. All right. So these would have been Buddhist monotheists or Jewish Buddhists, or, I mean, look, I desperately want to be, okay, a fly on the head of the first rabbi and or the first monk who decides to get together with all the other guys, tell them about this alien knowledge, which they think is really amazing. Because what Josephus says is that when they get together on the Sabbath, every seventh day, they sing their traditional hymns and perform their traditional liturgies, but they also perform Jewish liturgies and Jewish psalms. Now that must have been, oh fuck, did I come to the end of it?
No, you're fine. You're
No,
fine.
no, keep going.
Okay. Well, what that meant is that you get a weird hybrid of Judaism and Buddhism, which I had never thought about before. And because the therapeutai, which may be derived from Theravada, which is the oldest school of Buddhism, well, that may be a corruption when it gets translated into Greek as therapeutikos, which means healing, which is what the Asclepiads, which is what the medical tradition of Greece does. So therapeutai and therapeutikos may have, or rather, Theravada and therapeutikos may have given us the therapeutai. Now, here's the kicker. We get an even weirder religious arrangement, because I think the therapeutai, with their weekday hermit existence and their Sabbath every seventh day, the fact that they're chaste and poor and spend all their time isolated and talking to God, I think this is the source of the Eastern fathers, the desert fathers in Christianity about 300 AD. In other words, what I'm talking about is they're jumping on a very old tradition that goes back to this strange Jewish Buddhist hybrid. And so when they went, they probably occupied the same caves or the same, areas, and got their sustenance in the same way, because, all you can do is take gifts and also, look around for the few things you might find. So this is where the origin of the desert fathers in Christianity actually comes from. It's the product of Ashoka's remorse.
So you think Simeon subletted his pillar from a Jewish Buddhist monk?
Yeah, something. Well, I mean, no, they just one moved out of this.
The other moved in, right?
The other moved in, and both owe their rent to God. I mean, they'll think about it differently. There'll be a strange merging of traditions, but what they're all agreed on is that you have to isolate yourself and detachment, Abgelassenheit, like Meister Eckhart says. So that, I have to admit, I would like to have seen that, because it's so far out there. All right. Next one I would have liked to have heard. And here, I would not eavesdrop because it's a private, personal matter. Fair enough. But I would have loved to have asked Xanthippe, after the death of Socrates, what he said privately to his wife and children before he drank the hemlock. Now, if it's too private, I understand. I can't help but show the bad taste of asking, though, because I have to admit a fascination with Socrates, and it's hard for me, it would be hard for me to understand what the man behind the persona is without understanding what he would say to his family. He's got a limited amount of time, but he's known for his economy of speech. Okay, so what does he tell Xanthippe, who he doesn't get along with, and the three boys who are good for nothing? Right? So I have to admit, I really would like to have been there. And I don't mean to, I know it's improper, I know it's an intrusion, but I can't help but have the curiosity about it. Okay. Next one. I don't know if we have too many more, but the next one.
You got two more.
Two more, okay. Next one.
Sorry, you got one more.
All right. Next one will be 1219 in Egypt. St. Francis goes on vacation to have a chat with Sultan Malik al-Kamal. All right. because St. Francis does not speak Arabic, but is nonetheless a true believer. I mean, believers don't get truer than him. All right. He has a fellow Franciscan brother come with him on this journey. They both strip naked. They both hold crucifixes in their hand. And they walk alone into the Muslim lines, into the Muslim, because it's the Fifth Crusade. So they walk up to the Muslim line, butt naked, with just the identifier that we are Christians and we have no weapons and we need to be killed immediately. Okay, all right. The Muslims give them a good beating, but somebody intervenes and say, no, take the interpreter keeps saying, we have to talk to the Sultan, we have to talk to the Sultan. So they get beaten black and blue. They're butt naked and they hold onto their crucifixes and they get led into the Sultan. Now, this is going to be the opposite of the Pharaoh, right? This is going to be, what are you? I mean, just the Pharaoh, the Sultan, Malik al-Kamal, is actually a very worldly and very intelligent man. And he's just the foil for St. Francis here. St. Francis comes in and says, I've come to convert Islam. And Malik al-Kamal, the Sultan, says, you think both of you are going to do that? And St. Francis says, well, I'm not too sure about him. I just brought him as as an interpreter. I have actually come to convert you and everybody else. So you can all line up anywhere. It's convenient. And I'm going to Christianize you all, baptize you as long as I have water, And the Sultan says, well, are you crazy? I said, no, I'm far from crazy. Quite the opposite. I'm as lucid as I'm ever going to get. The reason why is that I have the power of Jesus with me. And so it doesn't make any difference whether you kill me. I'm in good with Jesus. And I actually came seeking martyrdom. I'm good for that. But I've also, remember that martyr means witness. And it can't but shake up all your people to look at a guy like me. Sultan says, what's so great about you? He says, here's the deal. I will undergo a trial by ordeal about which is the true religion, Christianity or Islam. You bring out your best imam. I mean, the kind of high end, I know you guys don't have a pope, but get a good one. All right. You bring him out here. We both walk through fire. And God or Allah would protect the right one, but not the one who's worshiping wrongly. When I walk out of that fire, every one of you guys is getting baptized. That's the wage. And the Sultan says, well, that's very interesting. I'm glad to hear that. And then goes back to his religious leaders, says, I need a guy to walk through fire. Also, if you don't want to walk through fire, this Christian guy has offered to retrieve a gold ring at the bottom of a cauldron of boiling water with his right hand. Any of you guys that want to step up and do that in the name of Allah, I'll remember you. I'll take care of you, and so will Allah. It turns out that he can't find anybody that wants to walk through fire or scald his right arm off. And then this is where, remember, St. Francis only gets started here. He says, okay, that speaks for itself, but I speak for God. And how about this? How about I walk through fire alone and then get a ring out of a cauldron of boiling water alone, and then all you guys get baptized? And now the Sultan is looking at this and he's saying, he's thinking, if I had 100 of these, I'd conquer the world. Right? I mean, there are believers, and then there's this. You're completely nuts. But I can't help but be impressed. I mean, you're the real thing. And as long as there's any of you left in Christianity, we're only going so far. We can't defeat that. Nobody can defeat that. And he says to St. Francis, well, actually, it won't be necessary. We won't be converting. And you really don't have to get burned alive. I'm good with that. I'll take your offer of being burned alive into consideration in all my thinking about you, right? But I won't really demand that of you. I'm good with that.
Okay.
And your translator looks a lot happier too. Right. Right. Okay. So he stays for an extended period, like 2 months, and they get to know one another. So, for example, uh, he says, get some clothing. You should. It's not decent for you to be naked. They bring all this kind of gilded, sultan clothing for the guys because they don't know what to put on them. And he says, no, we need coarse brown robes. We live a life of charity, and we don't own anything. And the Sultan thinks to himself, of course, why? Naturally, get these guys whatever covering they want. And then he says, my harem is at your disposal. I could send women around. And St. Francis says, I'm sorry, we live lives of chastity. We don't engage in sexual conduct. and the Sultan says, you don't want any money or any kind of gifts as you go. He said, no, we're not allowed to own any property. He says, all right. And I understand what I'm dealing with here. And you'll be safe as long as you're under my protection. No Muslim's going to kill this, right? Whatever you are. I'm going to send you back where you came from, but I want to talk to you for a while. And they do talk and they interact on a basis of mutual respect. And I would have loved to have been the fly in the Sultan's quarters, able to watch simple, non-libidinous, psychotically religious St. Francis, who at the same time, remember, this is a myth, the story about him. He was so gentle that he could preach to the animals, that he would just sit down on a stump and the animals would come and listen because they knew he would not harm them in any way. I think that the Sultan was reacting to whatever that thing in Francis was that made him really different. I mean, he didn't actually sport a halo, but there was a sort of light about the guy. I mean, you don't operate by the regular rules. And it's actually, it's a hapax that you hear at all. Do you know what a hapax is?
No.
All right, a hapax is the single use of a symbol in any literary corpus. So, for example, I'm not talking about alphabetic symbols. I'm talking about symbols that represent words or syllables, right? So hapaxes exist, for example, in Shakespeare and Dante, where they just use a word once, and it's the only example we have of the use of this word. And what that means is that it's exceptionally hard to figure out what it means, because you only have one set of contexts. It's what Wittgenstein talked about as the single use of a rule. Well, I mean, the rule could be anything because we don't know what it refers to. Okay. This is not only true of Shakespeare and Dante, it's also true of the Bible, and it's true of Mayan glyphs. There are some glyphs in these stones that we only have one of them. Okay. So when we try and translate, we don't know what to say about it because we don't have a second use of whatever rules being invoked, whatever references being made. Okay. In history,
we only have about a minute left.
I know, I got the time.
Right.
All right. In history, there also exist hapaxes. All right. They're those unique, I would have to say, miraculous events because they're so different from everything else. Right. And I really wish that I could have been there to see whatever it is that makes a thing like that go. For example, St. Francis notes after a couple of days that the Muslims all pray. I mean, not just those who are imams, everybody prays 5 times a day. St. Francis got to say, like, that's a well-organized society. He said, by the way, I really like that idea. We only do that in monasteries, but to have everybody do it all the time, all across the world, that's the way to live. And the mutual respect and mutual honor that they did each other, I think reflects very well on human nature. Yeah. So again, it'd just be an interesting thing to be able to hear.
Terrific. Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, we'll switch over to you now.
Okay, so my 10 are a little, a little more chaotic. I haven't thought about it as much. There's some overlap.
Do you want to take a few minutes?
No, I'm good. Look, this is a fun bar, beer game. A beer game.
Sure.
So one that I've always been fascinated is, you know that the Richard II is one of the most villainous Shakespearean kings. He was hated by his nobles. One of the most despicable things he did was respond to, I guess, a rising. Maybe it was Wat Tyler's rising.
Is this Wat Tyler?
I think it was Wat Tyler was the rising.
Right.
Yeah, the famous peasants rising.
Right.
And there were a lot of these. Basically, you know the story. After the end of the bubonic plague, there's a shortage of people. So the lords still expect to get the same take from half the number of peasants. And so they expect twice as much from the peasants, and the peasants are already starving. And so throughout Western Europe, the peasants rise. I mean, in France, it's called the Jacquerie, and they just start massacring the lords.
Right.
And they rise in England as well. In almost every case, the Jacquerie, anytime you get these, I hate to say this to our poor undergraduates, but anytime that the people are united and rise against the power, they all get killed. I mean, that's why people monopolize weapons and military things. But in the case of Richard II, he actually met with them and talked to them and negotiated, and apparently made deals with them that led them to back off. That's why the lords hated him so much. He sort of gave them some of what they wanted. We sort of know what he gave them. He accepted you don't have to pay double anymore, and we'll try and lighten some of the burden of villanage. But I would love to have been in the room to listen to that conference with him and the leader of the peasants and his courtiers around him, who are looking at him like, you're talking to this guy with the dirt under your finger. What is going on here? And he may have been, the reason he was so hated is he may have really been a great statesman. I mean, who knows?
Okay.
So that's one I'd like to, I mean, maybe not, but that's one I'd be very curious to see, because the treatment we have from the people who have the authority to leave records is very negative.
Yeah.
But it's the only time there's a massive peasant rising and there isn't a mass murder, and it's actually resolved. So that, to me, that's always been one. What the heck did he say? And what were the people around him thinking? And we have no idea. Similarly, I would love to have been a fly on the wall when the Pope and his curia are talking about what the hell are we going to do about Galileo? Right? Because by this point, by the time that they're ready to finally tell him to shut up, because they told him, well, be quiet, and then he kind of was semi-quiet and then not quiet, and is still pushing the Copernican thesis. The curia knows that Copernicus is right. I mean, they have no doubts of it. They've accepted it in their calendrical reform. They and we know that to some extent their thinking was, this is going to come out, but it can't come out now. There's too many changes going on. It'll just unnerve people and freak them out. And I would love to because I think the Pope was one of Galileo's fans, and the rest of the curia were like, no, this has got to stop. I would love to have heard what that conversation was.
Sounds like Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor.
It might have been. I mean, I don't know. It might have been,
bad for people.
Yeah, and but how do we do this without hurting him too much? Because he's a good man and we need his science. I don't know.
When he was condemned by the Inquisition, when they finally came down on him, the vote was 7-3 because there are 10 judges. And that, I think, probably shows what the break was. I mean, in other words, the Catholic community was very conflicted. And as you moved up the hierarchy, the less conflicted they were, the more they saw that he was right. But they thought it was dangerous because they thought everything new is Protestantism and were embroiled in the Wars of Reformation.
Undoubtedly, but I do wonder because we have an interesting take on the popes as being sort of corrupt, but there's sort of some corruption there, but they're also very worldly and they're very learned. I mean, the idea that these popes were ignorant and backward fanatics is absurd. They were incredibly cultivated, literate, and I'm sure must have been very conflicted, because can't let this be said, but it is the truth. And these were humanistic popes. So it must have been just a fascinating debate back and forth. And it would be interesting if it wasn't a fascinating debate, then it plays to our stereotypes, which is they were just backward and repressive. But if it was, it would show this was a very difficult decision.
The last Jesuit to defend heliocentrism was Clavius, but he was the Jesuit assigned to fix the calendar, and even he had to use Copernicus assumptions.
That's right. That's right. So that's my number 2. I have another papal conference, and it's funny. You had Francis with before the Sultan. I would, when Francis first meets the Pope, I don't want to hear that conference. I know what that's. I want to hear what happens when he leaves the room. What the Pope says. I mean, I really do, because he's like, I can't walk away from this guy. He has captured the European imagination. I mean, he has brought a new piety and a new flavor and a new fervor to Christianity. He's really just one of the great revivalists, but he's crazy. I mean, from our perspective of the papacy, this is a very dangerous guy, you know.
All mystics are.
Exactly. And particularly his vow of poverty is like, this is not really the image we want in the papal hierarchy. So, but at the same time, they needed him and they must have admired him. He was, I mean, for all, this is the why I'd love to hear the papal courts, because they're very worldly. And for us, we assume that means they're very cynical. But what we miss is they're worldly, but they also believe in their faith. Yeah. They are also people who really respect and admire holiness, but they're afraid that the institutions they had are fragile and those institutions are necessary. So you'd love to hear how they, because these are smart guys, how they're debating that.
You know what I think? They probably had one of the cardinals invite him to a very simple dinner and suggest a vacation in Egypt.
Well, they do eventually authorize his order.
Yeah.
He does.
You and your interpreter take that to Egypt.
Okay. All right. That's my number 3. What do I have? Oh, yes. Here's one I would love to have heard, which is assuming that the scriptural account is correct. So a lot of these are religious. I'll get off them in a minute. But I would love to have heard what the actual trial of Christ was like. Right? What exactly did Pontius Pilate say? What exactly did what exactly were the words of Herod and the Sanhedrin and Jesus? Because the Gospels do not tell the same story. Right? In one case, he's silent. In the other case, Pilate asks this wonderful question. What is
truth?
Oh my, wow. Would I have loved to have heard Jesus's answer to that? I mean, and you know he would have answered him.
No, you don't.
No, I think he would
have. Failure to answer is the answer.
Yeah, that's the biblical, and maybe that's true. I can't help thinking that at some level, maybe it's I've read too much Bulgakov, because his treatment of Master and Margarita is, yeah, but if Jesus is Jesus, he also came to save Pilate. Not just, he came to save the sinners. There's not a bigger sinner than Pilate. So his executioner has got to be someone he's trying to save.
See, I wouldn't see it that way. I would say that Judas is a much bigger sinner than Pilate. Pilate's just doing his job and has no particular investment in this. I think that the answer is that you move from language from language to the world. And when Jesus looks back at him, the answer is, it is he who stands before you. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So when he asks, what is truth?
Yeah, if he did, yeah.
What that means is someone asks the question because it doesn't have an answer in words.
Okay. Have you ever read Master and Margarita?
Yeah, I loved it.
Peter
Field give you that? Gave it to me too.
No, I don't know where I picked it up. But anyway, it's all about that encounter. The whole novel is about that. And, it would just be interesting to hear that one. There's another religious speech I'd love to hear. You were mentioning monasticism. I've always wondered, so the founder of modern, semi-modern Christian monasticism is Benedict. And Benedict was originally an ascetic. And then at some point, he decides he's going to come up with an order for the rest of for the rest of the monastic community, teach them how to be a community. And that means imposing on himself and on them a discipline that he had not previously experienced. And I would love to hear first what motivated him to ignore his own holiness and pursue others. And then secondly, what he said to them to get them to say, look, you guys got to get organized. And here's the thing, forget the alms, get to work. Get to work. How did he do that? What did he say? I mean, we don't, we know what his order enjoins, and we know the reasons he gives, but what did he say to the actual monks?
Ora et labora.
Yes, but why? How does he sell that? I mean, yeah, that's like the $10 billion question, because they think they can all get there just by, living on alms and asceticism. And he's
right. And there was no value placed on work. It was slavish and inferior. How do you accept them to accept that, that transformation?
Yes, exactly.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one, it must have been an amazing speech. Here's another one that we have no record of. And that is towards the end of the First World War. You had a World War I one, I have a different one. Towards the end of the First World War, the Americans are starting to break through. And it's clear, though they have not gotten to Germany yet, that they will shortly, that the Germans' lines are breaking, and that the German economy is collapsed, and that German society is dissolving. And the two leaders of the German High Command, Hindenburg and Ludendorff, go to the government and say, we need an armistice and we need it now, because in 2 weeks it's too late. They're on the way to Berlin. So before we lose the war, let's get to an armistice. We know they said that because they make the proffer for the armistice. I would love to have heard how they explained that, having said that we're winning all the time, constant, and it looked like they were, because they're always saying, look at the Eastern Front. We've conquered everything. The Brest-Litovsk Treaty has given us all of Eastern Europe is now part of the German Empire. All of Ukraine, all of that's Germany. What did he tell that government? Like, oops, here's a secret. And what did he agree with them? Because that information will be interesting as soon as they accept that armistice and it requires the Kaiser to abdicate and the collapse of the government. Within a week, he's saying, no, we would have won. You stabbed us in the back. So I'd love to see, what did he actually say? Did he actually believe that? Or is that just, this is a great general who was incredibly arrogant and failed once spectacularly and will never, ever acknowledge failing, especially to Americans. And so, I don't know what was said, but it would be fascinating to see how honest was he, and how honest was he with himself. So that's one. I'd love to be in the room when the church council sat down and how they decided which texts became canonical and which became apocryphal. And I'd love to hear the debates as they go through. Okay, let's see, you sure about this Johannine thing? You sure? Okay, well, what about Enoch? Enoch get in? And how the debates back and forth. Not just the, official ones, the commentaries that we get afterwards, but actually like, really sure we can let in this Revelations? And if not, why don't, if we can, maybe Enoch 3, maybe, and the same thing for the Hebrew scriptures. Okay, we really want to get rid of Lilith. Why are we getting rid of Lilith? Are we definitely do we want Tobit? How about the book of Judith? What do we do with Judith?
The Catholics, I think, have Tobit. I got taught it when I was a kid.
I think actually Catholics also read, though it's not canonical, a book of Judith.
Yeah.
Right. Weirdly enough, if you go to the Ethiopian Coptic New Testament,
yeah,
it's like, my God, it's the best. It has it's immensely long, their New Testament. It includes every apocryphal book.
Wow, that's
Enoch 1, 2, and 3, Tobit, Judith, anything you can imagine, like the book of creation, it's all in there.
it'd be great to see if we could see if do they have a Psalm 151, because they I think in the Eastern Orthodox tradition they hold on to that, but there are only 150 Psalms for everybody else. But it looks like, because of archaeological discoveries, that it's a legit Psalm, that there are 151 of them.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be wonderful just to know how they made those editorial choices.
Right.
You know,
That'd be very interesting.
yeah. Another heretical question on the other side. I would love to have been in Albi and heard the teachings of the Albigensian sages and troubadours. What did they actually believe, these Cathars? And how did they think they were going to get away with defying the papacy? I mean, they brought a crusade on themselves. It held out for a while till the King of France jumped in. What did they actually believe, and what did they think they were going to achieve within Christendom? And we don't know that, but that would have been very interesting, because they had a lot of spill-off effects. I mean, they get put down, and they can put down, and you don't have to worry about Catharism again for a while. But the troubadourian culture doesn't go away. That continues to spread. And a lot of their ideas, or at least what seem to have been some of their kind of mystical beliefs, continue to percolate through the Catholic community. I mean, not in the super heretical form they have there, but you know, the idea of a kind of Gnostic separation of matter and spirit, it's hinted at in Meister Eckhart. I'm reading Gershom Scholem on the origins of Kabbalah.
Oh, wow. That must be fascinating.
He thinks that's where it comes from. He thinks that Kabbalah is Jewish Gnosticism, and it comes out of Provence, out of Languedoc, and that ultimately it's not entirely a result of Catharism, but it's drawn on a lot of the same sources, and it is influenced by it. That's
many of the sources that they have in common are probably not accessible anymore. So
yeah,
you kind of work out mutual influences.
And he thinks a lot of it came because Provence has so much contact with the rest of the Mediterranean that it may well have come from the Muslim world, or at least the Levant. Not just Muslim, also the Jewish world in the Levant. I mean, there was still a large Jewish community in the Levant. So that would be just fascinating to find out what they actually know, and how they thought they were going to get away with this crap. Did they think they were going to conquer France? Did they think they were going to set up their own kingdom? Did they think they were going to hook? Because I do wonder, did they know about the Bogomils? Because they're not alone doing this. I mean, this is like going, where did they think that they would reunify the two Christendoms around these somewhat weird beliefs? I don't know, but it would be fascinating, because boy, did they go to
all of these highly structured churches need almost like a bolt of lightning, some challenge every once in a while, because the result is, of course, is that despite itself, the church that's going to come out is going to be revivified, because they have to deal with a problem like that. So I think that was true of the Eastern Orthodox with the Bogomils, and I think it's the same with the Cathars and Roman Catholicism. So a challenge, provided it's not too much of a challenge, is actually a good thing for the established church.
Yeah, it's a stimulus.
Inevitably, they incorporate some of what's been of what they're putting down. There's a saying that every heresy is a truth that's been forgotten.
Okay, interesting. All right. So another conference I'd love to know.
It's all religious conferences. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I promise. I will not get the next two. My final two will not be religious.
Okay.
Particularly in 20th century. And finally, in the 20th century. One, I'd love to be in a room when a certain poor Irishman gives English lessons in the early 20th century to an obscure Jewish businessman in Trieste. You know who I'm talking about. I would love what was said between James Joyce and Italo Svevo, right, in Trieste, because these guys meet in 1915, and Joyce is the English language tutor to, I guess his real name is, I think, Itor Schmidt or something like that. It's we know what happened, but we don't know what was said. What happened was,
Mm.
that he's training them, and Joyce says, by the way, I've got this book that I've tried to burn recently, called Stephen Hero. Would you take a look at it? And he reads it and he says, you're insane. Don't ever touch it. This has to be published immediately. And he does at 1915. And then Schmidt says to him, well, funny, I've been marking up some pages too. And he hands him The Conscience of Zeno. And he says, this has to be published immediately. So we'd love to hear what was said.
Yeah.
There are literary scholars claim that the Leopold Blohm character is in fact Sveva.
Wow.
Right. That's the Jew he knows. That's the Jew he's met, the Jewish businessman.
Wow.
And that's his sort of spiritual father. So it would be, I mean, that would be, what an interesting thing. An Irishman developing the conscience of the English speaking world in conversation with a Jew who's about to invent Italian literature. I mean,
Gotta like it.
Only in Trieste will you get that. So that's one I'd like to hear. And another one, I would love to hear how the conversation between Nikita Khrushchev and Georgy Zhukov after Stalin dies, and they know the next premiere is going to be Beria. How the hell did they come up with their plan and their agreement? And what did Zhukov think was going to happen? And what did Khrushchev think was going to happen? And what did they think would happen if they didn't put a cap in that guy's head? Which is what Zhukov did. Just when Beria is about to take power, Zhukov and the army charge in the room, arrest him, give him an instant trial, 45 seconds, bullet in the back of the neck, and Mr. Khrushchev, welcome to the premiership. What was that conversation like?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was, boy, that's world historical.
Yeah.
Imagine how
novel.
Yeah, imagine how different history would have been if Beria had succeeded.
Jesus God.
Yeah. Oh my.
He was a monster.
Oh, he was completely insane. I mean, the gulags would never have stopped.
Yeah.
And who knows what would have happened once they had the bomb.
Yeah. Well, that's a great set.
Well, you inspired me as I ran yours down. I was thinking, what do I got here? So those are the conversations I'd like to. A lot of them are in both cases. I'm noticing some overlap. One that I had down originally and you took away from me would have been, what did Genghis say to his disciples, to the various members of the tribes, to unify them, right? To tell them, look, guys, you're now Mongols. Where you're from, you're Mongols. This is our destiny. This is our place in the world. What are we trying to achieve? Because a lot of people don't. He's probably the world's greatest conqueror.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that's a very interesting question. It probably had some kind of religious resonance. I found out recently that the Mongols were a shamanistic, totemistic people. The shamans, the totem of the Mongols was the wolf, and that makes perfectly good sense. I read.
So is the totem of the Romans, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. That's right, because they get suckled by the wolf. Right. Okay, that makes sense. I think that the Comanche in the desert Southwest, in the absence of repeating rifles, I could easily see them unifying the horse tribes of the Great Plains and turning into something like the local Mongols.
Interesting.
They were amazingly good riders. They did all kinds of trick riding. They only used their legs, and they were able to fire 5 to 6 arrows a minute when they were circling the people they were destroying, and everybody was afraid of them. They almost killed off the Apache completely, close to annihilation, and the Apache were justifiably famous warriors.
Yeah.
So I think that the same technologies, if they were available or not available in both the old and the new world, would likely have produced similar results, which is why I think the Comanche are such an important part of the history of North America.
Oh, I think the other thing that I've always found it fascinating is, unlike other tribal groups, which often incorporate other tribes through conquest and marriage ritual, Comanche are not actually a tribal. I mean, they're a tribe, but they're not an ethnic group. Anyone can be Comanche. Black people can be Comanche. I mean, and that was literally what they did. They just organized anyone. It was a life. In a certain sense, they're like, and I think if you think about the Mongol horde, the core of it are about 250,000 actual East European, East steppe Mongols. But the vast majority of the horde that are Mongol are not actually Mongols.
Yeah.
You know, they're Azeris. In some cases, they're Slavs. I mean, anyone can join, and they do. It's a fun lifestyle. And so that would there is this phenomena of raiding cultures where the culture is unified around not a shared ethnicity or ethnos, but the act of raiding itself and the technique of raiding. And my guess is I think my sense is they probably all have to develop a shared religious cult. I think at some point, most Mongols do become Buddhists, some become Muslim, and when they do, that ends the Khanate. They start fighting among each other. So two other groups I think about in those relations. My understanding is the Cossacks are not actually an ethnicity. The Cossacks are just South Ukrainian Comanches. They were on the borderland between the raiding Tartars of Crimea, and it became a semi-nomadic community who lived by weapons, like Comanche, very egalitarian among themselves, but brutal to outsiders. And the other one I think of is not quite the same, but it again got some similarity, is Viking. And my sense is Vikings does not define an ethnicity, though there are ethnicities behind it. It's a religious and spiritual state, and it's the state of being a quasi berserker, and of being basically living in defiance of death.
Death worship
at every minute. Yeah, at every minute. And so I mean, I read recently, I don't know if it's true, that a genetic sampling of people of Iceland is that they're about 45 to 50% Irish. Right.
But
So
they're Celtic. They're connected to the Celts early on.
yeah, well, we know that the Danes conquered and the Norwegians conquered large parts of Ireland.
Right.
You know, we always work under the assumption these guys come in, they slaughter, they take over. And that may be the case, but very often they come in, they don't have to do much slaughtering. Most of Genghis Khan's victories were not military. People just submitted. They weren't stupid. They said, "Come on in. The doors are open. Take what you need." And then, you know, my guess is that over generations they started intermarrying.
Well, my last name is the Gaelic corruption of a Viking name, Sigurdsson or Siegfriedson, and that gets turned into Sigru. So yeah, I know about that interaction and that interchange. It's very interesting to see the long-term outcome of such intermixings. Sometimes you get them to go one trend, someone another, and sometimes they break away into their own third thing.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because at some point in the 19th century, as Europe decided to reorganize on national lines, they needed a principle of nationality. And because they hadn't quite worked out the independence of culture, they did it around the idea of ethnicity or race. And, you know, it's an interesting hypothesis, but it's just historically doesn't work.
Right.
Everyone is a mishmash.
Yeah.
You know, Anglo-Saxons, well, they are partly Anglo-Saxon, but partly Celtic, and the Welsh aren't any of that. And there's loads of Dane in there, and there's loads of Norwegian in there, and probably more than a little bit of Spanish. And, you know, there are none, you know, you're just not going to find anything that's
the vast majority of us are mutts.
Yes, that's exactly right. No, not the vast majority, pretty much all.
Regardless of what you've been told.
That's
about
right.
How purebred whatever you are, much more likely over the last 100 generations, you have had influences from God only knows where, and you're a mutt. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's you know, interesting because we get caught up with ideas of ethnicity and race, because they were thought to be the bearers of ideas.
Right.
But in fact, it's really just the ideas.
That's right.
And you know, to me, many examples come forth, but the most curious is the strange case of Benjamin Disraeli.
Yes.
That most English of Sephardic Jews.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, he's the leader of the Tories. He's the guy defending the Church of England. He's the guy defending little old England against these liberals out there. I think he was bar mitzvah. Yeah. I don't think it shocked the English at all. I think, you know, at that time they had not, who is the guy? Houston Chamberlain, who first teaches them about crazy racial theories.
Mhm.
And this is like instructive for our audience a little bit. These ideas about they're really new. They're like, we only know what happened in the last 7 seconds, but these aren't much older than the last 7 seconds. And so, you know, treat them with all the grains of salt that you can possibly find. So, I mean, that's another thing. It's just people have interpenetrated, their ideas interpenetrate. You know, you mentioned the influence of heresies on the church, which is true not only for the Western Church, but for the Eastern Church, for the Protestant Church. Well, I mean, you get the same thing in Islam, right? I mean, it's always had that split, at least by the time of Ali, between the disciples of the Sunni of the original Umayyad, and then the Shia. But each of those break into many smaller groups.
That's right.
And you know, weirdly, for most people, they don't realize that it's not true anymore. But probably about 150 years ago, most Muslims practice Sufi. I mean, they didn't care about the Sunni Shia thing any more than most Christians or Catholics in medieval Europe cared about Franciscans and Dominicans. You know, they went to the church and they were interested. A guy like Francis is perfect. He just gives them pietistic practices. The doctrine may not have been as central to them, you know, as much as the liturgy.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I think that was true with Islam. And I think that became true in Judaism in the late 18th century with the rise of the Hasidic movement, which, you know, basically is saying, look, we know you're not going to learn Hebrew. It's okay. God will hear your prayers even in Ukrainian, even in Yiddish, even in Polish. And you don't have to be at the synagogue to pray to God. You can do it while you're carving wood or milking cows, and you can do it just by singing and dancing and, you know, kind of mystical stuff. You know, it is fascinating to me. The guy who founds that movement, there's a lot of precursors, was a guy in southern Ukraine known as the Besht, the Baal Shem Tov, right? He's which means the good master of the name, or the master of the good name. It can be translated in various ways, and he's coming up with this sort of syncretism between Kabbalistic mysticism and more traditional Judaism. And he gets a revelation apparently to do this when he's chopping wood in the Carpathian Mountains. So he goes off to do retreat, and this is right after, at the very end of this immense wave of religious violence in Europe, the age of confessional strife, which was in Eastern Europe was really directed against the Jews. The pogroms were unbelievable. And his answer was, don't fight, pietism. At the same time that George Fox, at almost the exact same moment that George Fox is coming up with his reform of the Society of Friends. So at the same time, the Guru Nanak has gone up into the Himalayas and comes down in the middle of the Punjabi fight between Hindu and Muslim and says, there is no Muslim, there is no Hindu. We are all Sikh. And, you know, those are it's interesting. There are certain moments of religious hinge in the world.
Yeah.
Get this syncretism and these figures come out. And it must have been like the figure who spoke to Ashoka and had words with him. It was like, you know what? The forces that divide us are insignificant compared to the forces that unite us. And that's, unfortunately, you don't really get that until you've done a lot of dividing and a lot of killing. And then you realize it's time to just stop that.
It sounds like you're talking about the Geist.
I don't know if it's maybe it is the Geist, or maybe that Geist is a function of particular geopolitical moments when, all through the world, you're going through this incredible period of religious strife. In part, I know you like to do a little techno-determinism. If I could pick something to techno-determine it, it would be everywhere by now they have the printing press.
Mm-hmm.
So everywhere by now, it is cheap to learn to read. In other words, you could always learn to read before, but what was the point? You couldn't afford a book. It's a year's wages. So why would you waste good, hard time learning to read? But now it's affordable. And so a lot more people are learning to read. They are now starting to get in touch with their scriptures. Even in the East, I think by this point, what's the guy's name who starts translating the Hindu scriptures out of Sanskrit?
Oh, I know the name.
Hey, when you get old, you lose names.
Yeah, look, I'm lucky to remember my name.
That's just horrible. It's gonna torture me all night
Until we finish this discussion, and then it'll come to both.
Then it'll come to me and be right. Yeah, and I think that may have been it, as people are exposed to the literatures of the original doctrines. And I think they may look at what Muhammad said, or what Krishna said, or what Christ said, and said, you know what? I don't know that he'd have really cared that much about precise doctrine. I think he was talking more about changing hearts.
I think that orthopraxy is always more important than orthodoxy.
Yeah, that may be, or I don't know always, but at certain moments in history, that seems to be the card to play.
Yeah,
and
that's the ace of any religion. Orthopraxy over orthodoxy.
Yeah. Well, that's my 10.
That sounds like, they're all very interesting, and they reveal a lot about you too. Just the fact that you would choose those, and I know that you have so many to choose from, because I know that you know your way around history. In the future, Mike and Darren Unplugged will discuss various matters. I don't know the format or how we will do it, but it allows for podcasts or video casts, whatever they call them now. And I think that we'll continue to do this.
Absolutely.
Mike and Darren Unplugged is in some ways more useful and better reflects what it means to be a teacher, because we just move from one topic to another. It's not like sheet music that's fixed. We're improvising, but improvising at the piano is not like having the cat walk across the keyboard. Unless you know a lot about music, you can't improvise properly.
So what I would urge our auditors and our family of Mike Sugrue YouTubers is, if you have particular things you want us to talk about in the comment section, throw them down there. If there's particular topics you're interested in, or questions you have, or it could be something like whatever. It could be, what's your favorite book, or what should I be reading now? Whatever it is. I can't promise you we'll turn to all of them, but we'll certainly look at them and try to incorporate them as much as possible.
So that sounds good, Genevieve?
Yeah, it's perfect. We're just about to cut out. So
okay, well, Genevieve.